Once again, the people of Israel had turned away from God. Their hearts had grown cold, and they followed their own desires instead of God's commands. Because of this, their enemies, the Philistines, ruled over them for 40 long years. The land was heavy with sorrow, and the people longed for deliverance. But even in their disobedience, God had a plan that began with an unlikely couple and a promise of a child unlike any other. In the town of Zorah, there lived a man named Manoah and his wife. They were simple people, faithful to God, but they carried a great burden. They had no children. For years they had prayed, hoping for a child, but none came. One day, as Manoah's wife went about her tasks, an angel of the Lord appeared to her. His presence was glorious, and his words would change her life forever. A child after all these years? And not just any child, but one chosen by God to deliver Israel. Manoah was amazed but also uncertain. He wanted to hear the message himself, so he prayed. Darkness falls. Later, the woman is in the fields again. The angel appears once more, and she runs to fetch Manoah. He follows, his steps quick with anticipation. Manoah longed to honor the angel. He prepared an offering, placing it upon a rock. But something incredible happened. Flames rise from the rock, consuming the sacrifice. The angel steps into the fire and ascends into the sky. Manoah and his wife fall to the ground in awe. In time, the promise was fulfilled. A son was born to Manoah and his wife, and they named him Samson, meaning like the sun. He was strong, filled with purpose even from birth, and as he grew, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within him. The stage was set. Israel's deliverer had been born, but his journey was only beginning. The battles ahead would be fierce, the trials great, but through it all, God's hand would be upon him. Now Samson, a young man of immense strength and divine calling, traveled to Timnah, a Philistine city. There he saw a woman who captivated his heart. Without hesitation, he returned home and told his parents, insisting that she was the one he wanted to marry. His parents, devout Israelites, were dismayed. They urged him to find a wife among his own people, questioning why he would seek a bride from among their oppressors. But Samson was firm in his decision, unaware that God was using this desire to create an opportunity against the Philistines. Determined to proceed, Samson, along with his parents, made the journey back to Timnah. Along the way, he wandered into a vineyard where suddenly a young lion charged at him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson with great power, and with his bare hands he tore the lion apart as if it were nothing. His parents, walking ahead, knew nothing of the encounter. Samson continued his journey as though nothing had happened. Later, when Samson returned to Timnah to claim his bride, he passed by the place where he had slain the lion. To his surprise, a swarm of bees had made a hive inside the carcass, producing honey. He scooped some of the honey and ate it, relishing the sweetness. He also shared some with his parents, but did not tell them where it had come from. As the wedding feast commenced, the Philistines provided 30 young men to accompany Samson. Wanting to challenge them, Samson proposed a riddle, wagering fine linen garments and clothing. The riddle was simple but enigmatic. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. The Philistines, unable to decipher its meaning, grew desperate as the days passed. Frustrated, the men approached Samson's new wife, threatening her and her family. Terrified, she pleaded with Samson to reveal the answer. At first, he resisted, but after persistent nagging, he relented and told her. She immediately shared the answer with her people. On the seventh day, the Philistines confronted Samson with the answer. Realizing he had been betrayed, his anger flared. Enraged, he stormed off to another Philistine city, where he struck down 30 men, took their garments, and paid his debt. Furious and humiliated, Samson left his wife and returned to his father's home. In his absence, Samson's wife was given to another man, one of the very men who had accompanied him at the feast. This betrayal would ignite Samson's wrath once more, setting the stage for an even greater conflict between him and the Philistines. Samson had been wronged. He had been betrayed by his Philistine wife, but when he returned to claim her, he discovered that her father had given her to another man. Enraged, Samson was not one to let such an insult go unanswered. He plotted his revenge in a way no one would expect. Determined to strike back, Samson devised a plan involving 300 foxes. He set out into the wilderness, tracking and capturing them one by one. It must have been quite the sight, a mighty warrior, known for his strength, chasing foxes through the countryside. After gathering the animals, he tied them in pairs by their tails and attached a burning torch between each pair. The foxes, frightened and desperate to escape the flames, ran wild. As the torches blazed, Samson released the foxes into the fields of the Philistines. Chaos erupted. The fire spread rapidly, consuming the Philistine grain, vineyards, and olive groves. In mere moments, their crops, an entire season of food, were reduced to ash. The once prosperous land now smoldered under a sky filled with thick, black smoke. When the Philistines saw the destruction, they were furious. They demanded to know who was responsible for the disaster. Word spread quickly, and soon they learned that Samson had done it as revenge for his stolen wife. In retaliation, they stormed the home of Samson's wife and her father, setting it ablaze and destroying them in an act of brutal vengeance. The Philistines, unwilling to let him escape justice, gathered an army and set up camp in Judah, demanding that the Israelites hand Samson over. Fearing war, the men of Judah sent 3,000 of their own to confront Samson in his hiding place. They pleaded with him to surrender, terrified of the consequences. Samson, calm and composed, agreed to let them bind him and deliver him to the Philistines, so long as they promised not to harm him themselves. The men of Judah tied him up with new ropes and brought him to the Philistine camp. The Philistines erupted in laughter and jeers as they saw him bound, believing their enemy had finally been captured. But Samson had no intention of staying tied up for long. As the Philistines closed in, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. With a mighty roar, he snapped the ropes as if they were mere threads. Grabbing the first weapon he could find, the jawbone of a donkey, he unleashed his strength. With it, he struck down 1,000 men, leaving the battlefield littered with fallen Philistines. Samson stood victorious once more. But this victory, like all before it, only deepened the hatred between him and the Philistines, setting the stage for even greater battles to come. Samson, a man of immense strength, had long been a thorn in the side of the Philistines. His unmatched power, given by God, made him nearly unstoppable. However, Samson had a weakness: his love for Philistine women. It was this weakness that would lead him into the arms of Delilah and into great trouble. One day, Samson met Delilah, a beautiful and cunning woman who quickly won his heart. The Philistine rulers saw this as their golden opportunity. They approached Delilah with an irresistible offer: a vast amount of silver in exchange for discovering the secret to Samson's strength. Tempted by wealth, Delilah agreed. She began her mission by coaxing Samson into revealing his secret. One evening, as they lay together, she looked into his eyes and asked sweetly, "Samson, tell me the secret of your strength. How can you be tied up and subdued?" Samson, knowing better, teased her. He said, "If you tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have never been dried, I will become weak like any other man." That night, while Samson slept, Delilah signaled the Philistines hiding nearby. She tied him with fresh bowstrings and then called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson awoke, stretched, and snapped the bowstrings like threads, before laughing at Delilah's attempt. The Philistines fled, disappointed, but Delilah was persistent. The next evening, she pouted and pleaded again, "Samson, you lied to me. Tell me the real secret of your strength." Samson, still playful, said, "Tie me with brand new ropes that have never been used, and I will be as weak as any other man." That night, Delilah tied him up with new ropes while he slept, and once again she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson awoke, snapped the ropes like threads, and laughed again. Frustrated but undeterred, Delilah tried a third time. "Samson, how can you say you love me when you won't confide in me?" She whined, resting her head on his shoulder. Feeling playful, Samson said, "If you weave the 7 locks of my hair into the fabric of a loom and tighten it with a pin, I will be as weak as any other man." That night, Delilah carefully wove his hair into the loom while he slept. Once more, she called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson awoke and yanked his hair free, breaking the loom in the process. The Philistines fled yet again. Delilah, however, would not give up. She continued her manipulation, nagging Samson day and night until he was exhausted. Finally, he could take no more. He sighed deeply and revealed the truth. "My strength comes from my hair. If my head were shaved, I would be as weak as any other man." That night, while Samson lay sleeping in her lap, Delilah signaled the Philistines. A servant came in and shaved his head, removing the source of his strength. Then Delilah softly whispered, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke and tried to shake them off, but this time his strength was gone. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and dragged him away in chains. Samson, now once the mighty warrior of Israel, had been captured. The Philistines, his greatest enemies, had blinded him and thrown him into prison. His strength was gone, his dignity stolen, and he was reduced to grinding grain like a common slave. But his hair, the source of his God-given strength, had started to grow back. The Philistines, believing they had won, decided to celebrate. They threw a grand festival in honor of their god, Dagon. The temple was packed with thousands of nobles, rulers, and commoners, all eager to mock Samson and celebrate their victory over him. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of feasting. During the celebration, the Philistine leaders commanded that Samson be brought out to entertain them. They laughed at the once mighty warrior, now reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. A young servant led Samson by the hand into the center of the temple, placing him between two massive pillars. Samson, though blind, sensed an opportunity. Samson whispered to the servant, "Place my hands on the pillars that support the temple so I may lean against them." The boy obeyed, unaware of Samson's true intentions. Samson then lifted his face toward the heavens and prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please strengthen me just once more, so that I may take vengeance on the Philistines for my eyes." With newfound strength, Samson braced himself against the pillars. His muscles tensed, and he pushed with all his might. The massive pillars groaned, then cracked. The laughter in the temple turned to screams as the entire structure began to collapse. Dust and debris filled the air as the mighty temple came crashing down, burying Samson and everyone inside. In his final moments, Samson achieved his greatest victory. He destroyed more Philistines in death than he had in life. His sacrifice was not just an act of revenge, but a fulfillment of his God-given purpose, to begin delivering Israel from Philistine oppression. After the dust settled, Samson's family came to retrieve his body. They buried him in the tomb of his father, Manoah. Though his life had been one of great triumphs and deep failures, Samson's story stood as a testament to God's ability to use even the flawed for his greater purpose.
If you've been blessed, please like, subscribe, and share.